just want to get through this fairly quickly. All I'm trying to do is frame up these steps for you just so you understand their relationships to one another. The most important thing, the reason this is drawn as an arrow, is that these are downward dependent steps. And all that means is that for everything here, there is a kernel of information in the preceding step that needs to exist in order for the step to work. That's the reason for it. That's the reason that it's very hard to jump straight into executing. It's because you need to know what you're doing. Then you need to know how you intend to do it. So that, because here is where you have some sort of concept of what things are going right and things are going wrong. Like, it's the only way you can know. Because if you just jump into action, you can be doing anything and be like, oh, sure, this seems to be working. So that's, so downward dependency. This is, for this model, I want you to keep it in mind, and particularly for these more complex models, for things like estate planning over a long period of time. This is all in there. You just need to realize why you're doing it in the sequence you're doing it. And so just believe me, on the face of it, just believe that downward dependency is a very important concept when it comes to things that take you time to complete. Okay. Noodling and chunking. This came out of my working with people in business, which was that I was trying to really get them to understand the distinction between big ideas. Like, if people will, for big technology jobs, they'll walk in the door and be like, we just want to change our customer's entire experience of us, and we want to increase the speed exponentially. And you go like, hey, that's great. That's a great place to start. That is noodling. That is just getting, you're just blue sky. You're throwing things out there. And there's a reason, there's a benefit to it. The benefit is, by not putting any kind of parameters on it, you're going to tend to capture the thing that's most important to you. So that when you think about your goals, start crazy. Just be crazy at the beginning. Just throw things out there like, I want to be a billionaire, and I want to have, dope shoes or whatever. Because that's what the conception phase is. The conception phase is to throw things on the table so that everything's available to you. And then the chunking is when you take that big vision, that big dream, and you turn it into operational things. So this is what is going to become your goal. So if you get comfortable thinking this way, moving between those two states, you'll get a lot more out of it, because I think there is a tendency for people to begin in the chunk phase, and it just tends to constrain their imaginations. And so I really want people to be confident in that. Okay. And that's the reason that step one is described as 1A and 1B. It's just conception is one thing, and then refining is a different one. The reason that this is such an important step, and why it's always the number one step, is it's totally acceptable for the outcome of a step to be like, I don't want to do this. That's part of the job of the step, is to be able to determine whether or not it's useful. Because, again, like I said, you carry ideas around with you all the time. You think they are super important and the most important thing in the world, but once you start to think to yourself, well, I actually have to do this now, then it just becomes like, hey, you know what? This one goes in the no pot. And so always accept that this early phase, the opening phase of your process, it's about both rejecting and accepting concepts. So you just start loose, and here, I shouldn't even use the word artifact. It seems so businessy, but really you just need to write it down. Write down your ideas so you can see in front of you what you've been thinking all this time. And we'll go to the next one. And in this slide deck, I just go through sort of step by step what to do for each of these things. But for brevity's sake, we'll skip over these and just work with the steps today. So we go to the next slide and the next slide. So when you move into the definition phase, you take the written document that you created, and then you start to refine them down into actionable steps. And this is, I was trying my best to give examples that make sense. But just this idea, like losing weight is a high-level idea, turned into lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks becomes a refined idea. I want to write a book. It's a great idea, but what do you mean by it? Here I was like, I'm going to write a mystery novel roughly to 60,000 words in 10 months. It's all about sort of taking broad concepts and turning them into things that you can apply some kind of planning to. So these have the feature of having a boundary of sort of quantity and quality, so that the constraint, in this case, are months or days or whatever. The constraint's the thing that's going to determine your planning process. So always remember that that's, when you get into your plan, you may say, well, I might be being a little aggressive with my constraint, or I might be being way too loose with my constraint. So just keep that in mind, because you have no reason to know whether these are good goals or not until you get to the planning phase to begin with. And this is also another moment when I really want to encourage you to go find mastery processes to apply to your specific goal. I found a wonderful book about writing books on the weekend. It was awesome. I paid no attention to it, and I must have wasted 3 years in the process. But the intention here is just to start to avail yourself of the knowledge that's available in the universe. You aren't by yourself when you do this kind of work, so use the internet to your advantage. Okay, so we'll go on to our next step, and we'll get on to step 2. So the next step is the planning phase, and this is really where you take sort of like 10 months. 10 months becomes a date, so you actually have a target date that you're working with. You need to define all the actions that you're going to need to take to get to your outcome. You need to determine how are you going to track that. It can be different things. I mean, for like my weight, I weigh myself in 4 times a week, but I only have one official weight, so there's only one number that matters. And then how will you be reporting? Because you do need to report to yourself, somebody else, I don't care. But what you can't do is believe that you're going to start a 10-month process and that you're going to be really good. Don't make that assumption. You need to either have some kind of out loud written report to yourself, and that's why it's always good to get a buddy in there, because you can just report to them. But that, depending on the goal, I think that I love weekly reporting because it really keeps me on track. But maybe it can be a monthly report, like if you're doing some kind of financial goal, whatever. But the idea of the report needs to stay with you, that you don't give yourself all this wiggle room where maybe I succeeded, maybe I didn't succeed. It's not good. Okay, and then we'll move on to the next. See, actually, looking to go back one, this is one thing I really do want to stress this again. Don't reinvent the wheel. There is nothing that you want to do that hasn't already been done by somebody else. Take the moment to go and find that. Find an example that you like. Because you can actually find, because you'll find examples where you're like, I think this person's stupid. And you can just keep going and go find another one. But use the fact that we are a documenting crazy people, and that I am shocked by how much information is available on the web for pretty much any success process you're looking for. Okay, next one. This commitment is notional, but meaning that you should be committing throughout this process. But I think that you tend to get more serious about your commitment right before this next step, which is your doing step. Like, I'm starting my goal. But I just can't stress this enough. If you don't feel emotionally engaged with whatever your goal is, you fix it now. Like, go back and fix it. Something has to change. If it's strictly intellectual for you, you are likely to not do it. It's just the nature of humans. So find something about it. And I gave you something a note once we were talking about, I can't remember what it was, but it was like detailed stuff, like you wanted to get like your scanning done for things.
Right.
And if you guys have never worked in the consulting field, I mean, you get a lot of receipts and they just sort of pile up, and you should do it every day, but you don't get around to it. And it was an interesting question that gave out, because he was like, hey, I was not that jacked up about doing this. I know I need to do it, but I'm not that excited about it. And as I noodled through that, I was kind of like, wow, that's a good point. It's sort of like, that can't really be a goal. It's an activity. Like doing your budget is an activity. It can't really be a goal. The goal needs to be something like, I need to save money, or I want to go on vacation next year, so I need to save money, or whatever. The budget becomes the thing you do to reach the goal. And I never really thought about it until you sent that note, because I was like, well, I wouldn't be that enthusiastic. This list does not enthuse me in any way either. And as I started to work through that, I realized that that's an important thing. There's a reason we don't do the stuff we're supposed to do. And it's because, when it's unbound by any kind of real outcome, doing your budget is only really useful when you're trying to get someplace. Otherwise, it's like, I'm making enough money, cover my bills, everything's okie dokie. But doing a budget, it's all about figuring out whether or not you can shave $10 off here and $4 off here, and it starts to become a war chest for you. So that's just something really important when you reach this point. If you have anything in you that is not really sort of feeling like I am 100%, I'm not just interested in doing this, I am excited about doing this. Then you just need to go back and figure out what's going on. Something's going on in your head that just, you either defined it too narrowly so that it's not interesting to you, or it's too broad. So keep that in mind. And we're going to the next step. Executing and tracking. I am a huge fan of stick.com. It's an internet site where you can go in and say, I would like to write 1,000 words a week, and you have a choice. You don't have to put stakes down, but you have the option to put financial stakes down. It's like, if I don't do this, I'm paying this person $25. But at minimum, if you don't take advantage of any of that, where you just say like, there are no stakes, I just want this to happen, still, once a week, you need to go in and say that you did it or you didn't do it. And I find it to be a very effective tool. But one thing that I've discovered working with Lincoln over the last year or so is that there's nothing magical about it, it's just a really convenient tool. And that if you are committed to not doing what you want to do, stick is not going to make you do it. But if you do sort of use it in the spirit in which it's offered, which is to give you sort of just like something that takes it out of your sort of universe of your psychology and it's sort of over here, just writing the goal in the stick is a very effective tool because you realize that you have to report on it. So the way it's written becomes very important as well. So if you like using that, I think that's good. But you can use spreadsheets. You can just report it into a spreadsheet. You can just have a list that you keep on your wall. I've got a whole lot of grids that I like to do for my daily tasks that I need to do. And it's just little check boxes. I go through and check them and say, oh yeah, I did it. I didn't do it. And but it's again just a physical artifact. Body transformation photos are always helpful. It's whatever works. I mean, that's really what I want to get across is that use tools that are effective in keeping you on track. So, and we're going on to the next one and the next one. And then the assessment phase. Actually, I'm sort of giving short shrift to the execute phase. That's where everything comes down. That's when you start to have to bring all of this to the table, where it's Thursday, and it's like, oh, I really want to go out, and I want to eat like a hog, but I can't. And so and I'm just constantly realizing that from week to week to week, that I need to bring pretty much everything that I've talked about in one way or another, I need to bring it to the table all the time, like constantly. There's no consistency to it. I can go 3 weeks where I am unbelievably disciplined, and in the 4th week, all of a sudden, I'm undisciplined. There's no pattern to it, there's no anything. So it's really just about being conscious of the fact that anything can crop up, and it's your job, when you're in that execution phase, to adapt and move. That for me, those weekly goals are all that matter. I have to leave this room today, and I have to write I could edit 5 pages and I need to write 600 more words today in order to be in compliance with my weekly goals. I would like to go home and watch the Masters, but it is not going to happen. And so that's all in this execution phase. So just keep that in mind. Pretty much everything we talked about, it's the big problems happen when you're doing. Okay? And but I'm sorry. Assessment is this idea. It's really, really important when you get to the end of anything to just know, to just sort of put a pin in it and kind of say, okay, well that actually went pretty well. My assessment for this current weight loss period is not a pretty one because it's a 12-week period and I am at 60%. I've sent my nephew $200. Do you understand how little that boy needs $200 of my dollars? But I just would fail on these things, and I know exactly why it was, because I've just lost my enthusiasm for this. I'm much more excited about the fact that it's nice outside, and I'm writing my book, and I lost $200. And like all this weird psychology starts going through my head. But for 40 weeks, I was at 100%. I actually was just really, really good about sticking to my goals. So, but that's what I'm going to do at the end of this 12-week cycle, is I'm going to do an analysis of really where did I lose focus, because I need to do it again. And I'm going to take that knowledge and apply it to all of my other goals as well, because if I do it in one place, it usually means I'm doing something similar in other parts of my life. Okay, and I think that's it, so let's throw. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys if you have any questions at all.
Is that going to be the name of your book, Fundamental Success, or no?
I think, basically, just so you all understand, the fundamental thing, I like this idea of getting to the core of things. So the success is this broad concept, but I really do think that there's some exploration for like fundamental psychology and fundamental discipline and all of these things where there's worth sort of looking at the core things. But at the moment, I don't know. The book I'm writing is actually a fun book. Like I've not. This is. I'm still experimenting with it. I believe strongly in this knowledge base and trying to deliver it to people because it just. Everybody has something they need to apply this to. There just is. It can be something simple as I don't clean my apartment enough. You can apply success processes to the sort of like determining what's an effective cleaning strategy for your life, your living space. To unbelievably big things. I've known friends that have just unbelievable business success, just amazing business success, and they all start from these beginnings. They look and they say, you know what? I need to make $25,000 in 2 months, and they don't know what. They have no clue as to what's going to happen. That just becomes their goal, and they just go out and make it. And the shocking thing is that usually, if you've got enough passion and you've got simple, because that's a simple target. You just put a number on a sheet of paper and say, you know what? I will do whatever it takes to make this amount of money in that period of time. All of a sudden, you've got $50,000. It's just amazing. It is just amazing to me if people who are money motivated, what can come from that? Because it's such a simple thing. It's simple mathematics. It's like once you get $1, you got to get the second dollar, you get the third dollar. You just got to keep the dollars coming in. And that's where I think that those can be simpler. I think it's if you're willing to sacrifice a lot of quality of life in order to get money. I think getting money is fairly simple in our culture. And so, but that there is a trade-off there. And that for some of my friends, I really think it was very interesting because they were so money motivated. That I have a very dear friend who he made so much money I couldn't believe it. It was crazy how much cash this guy pulled out. But then it was like his life was just a shambles. There was just like this path of ex-wives and depressed children, and it was just horrible. But he had made these millions and millions of dollars, and it was just so interesting to see the complete disconnect. And for me, I honestly believe that my friend was attacking success as a happiness vehicle, and that's really where he lost his path. So that's so that's an important thing. Anything else? No, nothing.
Well,
This time around, I think one of the things that resonated to me is the conflict between deferred gratification and mortality. Because I know to a certain extent I have lived my life, given an event in my life where a very dear uncle was murdered. And he had sacrificed a lot of his life trying to get a PhD, and he was murdered the day he finalized his thesis. So I didn't realize the impact of that in my life until I passed the age he was murdered. And now I'm thinking, wow, I've been living, trying to get instant gratification and not deferring because of that mortality fear, that if I die today, then I lost on all of this thing. But now I'm realizing, well, there has to be a point where these two concepts have to kind of blend somehow.
Well, and I think that's a great example of paradox. Is that, I think that it is absolutely smart to plan for the future. Like, it's not, it's like, I got $1, I spend $1. That's not a great way to approach life. And then you have to sort of like balance that paradox out. If I'm saving this money for the rainy day that may never come, I also need to enjoy today. I mean, I can't, I can do both, but I need to have sort of that understanding of the paradox. Of, what, it's very important to defer and save for the future, to plan for your future. And simultaneously, it's very important never to sort of feel like you've robbed yourself completely of a life for that deferred future. And I think that that's just so much when you talk. And God knows, I had a guy I worked with who he flipped me out so bad that because I worked right next to him, I physically sat next to him, and his energy was just insane, where he would say how long you had until retirement. Every time I came in the office, he would spout off how many years and days until the time that he would retire. It was like 14 years. And I was just like, and he hated being in the office. He hated it. And he was reminding himself every day that he had 14 more days, 14 more years until such time as he would be happy. And it was just as a 25-year-old person, it was a weird thing to be around, is all I can say. So yeah, I think that's just a really important thing to see. Is that, I think that for your uncle, that's a very interesting thing, because he was pursuing a passion. He wasn't necessarily deferring anything. He was working towards a goal. And I think that it's just so important to have this relationship to mortality. And again, I don't know if I know I told everybody who's here about these, but there are 2 books you read till you die. It's Seneca's On the Shortness of Life and Think and Grow Rich. These are life-changing books that Seneca in particular, because the Romans were very good about just sort of laying out, what was the thing you said? Something about people hurling, that they eat and...
Yeah, that's about it. They'd eat until they needed to throw up to eat more.
And then we complain about life sort of stinking or something.
Right.
Yeah, it's just he just has a really good outlook. Marcus Aurelius is another Stoic philosopher, and to read some of these things, it just blows your mind, because they do these one-off statements about, like, we've all seen body parts in the street. And I read that, and I was like, what? What? Apparently in ancient Rome, that was normal, seeing hacked off body parts wherever you happen to be going. And to remind it, when it comes to abundance versus scarcity, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about just seeing the detritus of human bodies as we walk down the street. That's an awesome thing. And being able to sort of ground yourself, it also helps, I think, with this idea of value. Having a value system in your life. I think it's very important to be able to rank things in your life. This is the most important. This is the second most important. This is the third most important. Because I find a lot of people get into this space where everything's equally important. And that's just not, it's very difficult to make decisions when everything's equally important.
What is the name of the other book?
The Seneca?
An author?
So, On the Shortness of Life, Seneca.
On the
But that's and unlike the last time we did the seminar, I thought we'd come to a pretty good place of being able to have sort of weekly get-togethers to help people support their goals. So I'm going to keep that up. It's been, participation's been like amazingly low lately. So we're just going to keep seeing how, you know, if nobody shows up, then I'm going to shut this thing down. But that's what I'll be doing for the next like 3 or 4 weeks. I'm going to go ahead and schedule some time on the weekends. And if anybody, does anybody like the weeknights? I mean, I don't know if that's better. I just use the weekends because it's easy for me. But anybody have a preference? Like, do take an hour and a half on a weeknight versus a weekend?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
weeknight.
Okay, well, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna go ahead and so I'll just keep keeping an eye out for those coming. But basically, what I would like people to do is, that if you've already got goals, that's great. But if you haven't really sat down and like formalized anything, bring them together, and then we just use the get-togethers as a way of helping refine process or discuss challenges that we meet. There you go.
I think weeknights is definitely a good idea.
Okay.
Just because I found that weekends has been more of a kind of like a relaxed time, or get like work done outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
And the times that this is scheduled on the weekends is kind of like right.
Just
The errands.
Yeah.
Well, and as an unemployed person, I'm so jealous of just my time. I just like, I can do anything I want, whenever I want. So, yes, weeknights is fine. I'll be happy to.
Well, I think also with the spring and the summer coming along, there's going to be much more activities over the summer because people do like barbecues and outings and trail hiking and all that stuff. So,
And just a quick show of hands, like early in the week, later in the week. I mean, what's the way that the rhythms of your weeks go? Like smack in the middle, like a Wednesday, or what do you think?
Wednesdays.
because that's hump day.
That's what I'm thinking. So I'll shoot for that and see, because I have no idea what the room availability is like here during the week. But I'm gonna go ahead. Yeah, but that's what I'll do. I'll start scheduling more during the week, and just to see if we can get more folks coming in. Because again, nobody comes in. It's really not worth my time.
I just want to suggest like 7 o'clock because I have some after work jobs and then dinner and
Oh, sure.
7 would be a good time. 7 to 7:30 would work well for me.
And that'll fit. Actually, 7 o'clock. I have a very early bedtime, so I think 7 o'clock would work perfectly for me. If we go 7 to 9, and that would be good. Sweet. So with that, anything else before I turn you loose into the cruel world out there? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh. I need all the validation. Now we need to get Mr. Gaffney back to the.
Are you going to be posting this video at all, or?
If it came out, I will be. I'm going to try and chop it up into segments, and I'm also going to see if I can get smart enough